Hello everyone, I'm Srivalli, a volunteer in Shivi Forensics, and in this video, we'll see the explanation of some MCQs in the topic fingerprints created by Akriti Maurya, a volunteer in Shivi Forensics. But before we dive in, let us know what is a fingerprint. These are the unique permanent friction rich patterns that is present on the fingertips formed typically during the third and the fourth month of fetal development. They remain unchanged throughout life, and no two individuals, even identical twins, share the same patterns. These are unique, permanent, and they can be classified easily. They became one of the most reliable methods of personal identification in the field of forensic science. The first question that we have here is, which European is often credited with being the first to recognize the value of fingerprints as a means of personal identification? And the options are Alphonse Bertillon, Francis Galton, William Herschel, and Johann Caspar Lavater. The answer is William Herschel because he was a British administrator in India, and he is often recognized as the first European to implement the use of fingerprints for personal identification. He began using fingerprints during the late 1850s as a form of signature verification in native contracts to prevent fraud and impersonation after realizing the permanence and the unique patterns that is present on a fingerprint. Moving on to the next question. The first scientific classification of fingerprints was given by option A. Edward Henry, option B. Francis Galton, option C. William Herschel, and option D. Henry Fowles. The answer is Edward Henry because Sir Edward Henry, when he served as the Inspector General of Police in Bengal, India, he developed the first practical and widely used scientific system for fingerprint classification during the late 19th century. That system was named after him and known as the Henry Classification System, and that was published in his book Classification and Uses of Fingerprints, which became the standard for law enforcement agencies worldwide. While Sir Francis Galton and Sir William Herschel, they made significant contributions to the study and the use of fingerprints, Henry's system provided the step-by-step or the comprehensive classification method which is required for practical applications in criminal identification. We'll move on to the third question. A pattern with one delta and a ridge bending back on itself is option A, arch, option B, whirl, option C, loop, and option D, composite. The answer is loop. If you notice your loop pattern in a fingerprint, that contains one core, one delta, and one or more ridges that enter from one side, they recurve and exit from the same side. But a whirl pattern has at least two deltas. So a loop pattern is formed basically they enter from one side, they travel, they recurve and exit through the same side, which is why a ridge bending back on itself is known as a loop. The next question is, a ridge that forks and forms a complete circle and then becomes a single ridge again is called as option A, island, option B, bifurcation, option C, fork, and option D, anastomosis. The answer is anastomosis because we use the term in forensic science to describe a specific type of fingerprint ridge characteristic or a minutia, where a single ridge travels and it splits into two, which forms like a complete enclosed loop or as a circle, which we often call as an island or an eye in general terms, and then the enclosed loop merges back into a single ridge. This is a key feature that we can use for individual identification so that we can distinguish it from a simple bifurcation, which we call it as a fork, or as an island. Island is known as a short enclosed ridge which does not rejoin the original line, but if it rejoins, then we can call it as anastomosis. Moving on to the fifth question. The concept of poroscopy was given by option A, Karl Landsteiner, option B, Barrard, option C, Edmund Locard, option D, Hans Gross. The answer is Edmund Locard Poroscopy is a method which involves the comparison of impressions of sweat pores on the friction ridges. This was discovered and developed by Dr. Edmond Locard of Lyons, France in the year 1912. He also coined the term poroscopy. Moving on to the sixth question. If an imaginary line drawn between the two deltas of a whirl pattern touches any of the spiral ridges, that pattern is classified as what? Option A, central pocket whirl. Option B, central pocket loop. Option C, accidental. And option D, plain whirl. The answer is plain whirl because plain whirl is a type of fingerprint that typically contains two deltas and one core with at least one spiral ridge that is touched by an imaginary line which we can draw between the two deltas. Other whirl patterns like the central pocket whirl will not have a ridge that is touched by this imaginary line because their cores are generally more centrally located. Moving on to the next question. Which of the following methods is oldest reported method to visualize the latent finger marks? Option A, ninhydrin method. Option B, iodine fuming method. Option C, cyanocrylate fuming method. And option D, silver nitrate method. The answer is iodine fuming method because this method has been considered as the ancient and oldest practiced methods for the visualization of latent fingerprints. This method uses iodine crystals which turn into a vapor when heated, and that vapor temporarily stains the fingerprints by reacting with the fatty acids and lipids on the fingerprint residue, and it makes the fingerprint visible. It is a physical method as the iodine does not form a permanent chemical bond. Moving on to the eighth question. In the development of latent fingerprints by ninhydrin, it reacts with the following. Option A, fatty acids. Option B, amino acids. Option C, glucose. And option D, sodium chloride. The answer is amino acids because ninhydrin powder is first dissolved in either ethanol or acetone at room temperature, and that solution is sprayed on fingerprints. The solution reacts with amino acid present in our fingerprints and produces a deep blue or purple color which is known as Ruhimann's purple. Moving on to the ninth question. Latent fingerprints can be developed on the multicolored surfaces by option A, white powder. Option B, black powder. Option C, grey powder. And option D, fluorescent powder. The answer for this is option D, fluorescent powder. Latent fingerprints are invisible prints which is left behind on a surface. On multicolored surfaces, if we use white, black or grey powder, that would make the print difficult to see against certain background colors. When we use fluorescent powders, they stand out regardless of the background colors because they glow under the ultraviolet light. This allows for better visibility and the lifting of the print. Moving on to the last question. The latent fingerprint development reagent 1,8-diazafluorine 9,1 is also known as which of the following? Option A, DFO. Option B, SPR. Option C, RDox. And option D, VMD. The answer is option A, DFO. The reagent 1,8-diazafluorine 9,1 is known by the acronym DFO. That is a chemical method which is used for detecting latent fingerprints on dry, porous surfaces. Porous surfaces are the surfaces that absorbs water. That surfaces includes paper, cardboard and wood. This method works by reacting or interacting with the amino acid that is present in the latent fingerprints and develops a stable pale pink fluorescent color. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to Shivi Forensics for more educational videos like this.